All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Believe in Sabres. Adam Benigni of WGRZ TV and Sal Maiorana, the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. And at center on the top line today is Matthew Fairburn, a lead beat writer covering the Sabres for The Athletic. Also, terrific podcast, the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. Matt, we go way back, man. All of us do, from your time covering the Buffalo Bills and now with the Sabres. Good to have you on, man. Appreciate the time. How you doing today?
Oh, it's great to see you guys. I'm doing well. Little worn down, but it's been a long few days here.
After two games, he's worn down.
Well, look,
man,
look, it's been a long time since the Sabres have been in the playoffs. So it's my first playoff experience, just like a lot of these guys on the ice. So I'm still getting used to it.
You know what? I was talking to John Scott about that, who took over for me at Channel 2 as the sports director, and we still work Sports Talk Live every Monday night together. And I was saying, just brace yourself, man. Because he's like, he came in, I think it was 2014, and he's never experienced anything like this. I'm like, it restructures your spring. Things, all of a sudden, you're dealing with a playoff game and the first round of the NFL draft. And this is a grind, man, not obviously for the players, but from a media perspective, traveling, everything else, these series tend to extend, and it's a grind. So 2 games into it.
Well, it's interesting because, like, I think if there were, making the playoffs is one thing, but this season has been interesting. This has been a journey, right? Like the early part of the season was one thing. So you're dealing with the general manager getting fired in the middle of the season and everything that comes along with that. And then them becoming the story of the league with how they finished the season for 4 straight months. And so then, bunch of travel, waiting for them to clinch and all that, and then it's like, finally, oh, here we go. They're actually going to play these playoff games. And so the build up to it made it a little bit of a different beast, but it's been a lot of fun. And I'm probably mostly just worn out because of my 2 human alarm clocks at home that don't let me catch up on the other end. So,
right.
But yeah, so jumping on a plane to Boston in a few hours. So
he's still early in his parenthood venture. My baby just turned 28 yesterday. So he's got a long way to catch up to me. He's in that fun phase though. Matthew, I do have this to say: if they play the way they played last night, your spring is going to get cut very short because they're not going to beat Boston playing the way they did. That was as exciting as the first game was, and they did outplay them, even though they only led for the last 4 minutes. They outplayed Boston most of that game, as we would all agree. But last night was a shit show of the highest order. They were completely outclassed in that game. What the hell happened?
Yeah, this is part of what happens in the playoffs, right? There's a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of a chess match. And I think it was a combination of things for the Sabres last night that you've got, it's hard to have everything that happened on Sunday night. That might be harder to come back from than the loss that they had last night. The emotion and the anticipation of the first playoff game in Buffalo in 15 years, and then the scene that it was pregame and during the game, and then following that up with as emotional a comeback as you could possibly have. You talk about experience in the playoffs, that's where it shows up, right? The ability to gather yourself, get yourself back up and play another game. I thought they were up for the game against Boston in game 2, but what's pretty clear to me through 2 games is that they are tactically, Boston has them right now. They are clogging up the neutral zone, and the Sabres have not yet found that counterpunch, that answer to the way Boston is playing. These games have played out exactly how Boston wants them to play out, even though the Sabres were outplaying them for a stretch in that, game 1. Boston was still limiting the high danger chances. There's been a lot of talk about Jeremy Swayman, and to me, Swayman hasn't really been tested all that often in this series, other than late in these games. And I would say he was a big contributing factor to why the Sabres were able to come back in game 1. So they have to find an answer to the way Boston is playing, incredibly structured in the neutral zone, incredibly structured in the defensive zone. the Sabres love to play on the rush. They love to get their defensemen involved in the offense. But if that's not there, then you need to go to that Florida model, right? Of getting pucks behind them and forechecking hard and wearing down their defensemen. I don't think Boston's defensemen particularly want that kind of game. I don't think they want to be going back and retrieving pucks all night and trying to break it out against these forwards. And the Sabres can cycle really well as a lot of teams in the league. They've shown that a lot throughout the season. So I think this is where it's good to have Lindy Ruff, a guy that's been around, a guy that can make these adjustments, keep the team in the right emotional headspace, and maybe make a few lineup tweaks to get them back on track.
Yeah, we talked before. I was at game one and watching that. And really, as you had said, I know the shots on goal, it kind of skews it a little bit because of the fact that Swayman was able to see and handle so many of those so easily, right? But I thought, it reminds me of the New Jersey Devils back in the day, right? They're not playing a neutral zone trap per se, but the way these teams are built so differently, and the way Boston likes to clog things up in the neutral zone and prevent that transition game, which has been such a strong point for Buffalo and how they kind of came alive, that outlet pass from the defensemen and then have them join the rush. But the forwards are getting it on the tape through the neutral zone and into the offensive zone. Boston has really been able to disrupt that. And as adaptable as the Sabres game has been, I kind of agree with you that their DNA is speed, right? And that's the big difference in the philosophy behind these two lineups. And we've seen it play out really in Boston's favor for 50 of the 60 minutes in game one, and the vast majority in game two, certainly, but for the comeback at the end. We should probably get to the situation in goal, because that's a headline going into game three, right? And Lindy's being cryptic about it at this point. But as you pointed out on Twitter, Matt, I mean, he's mentioned a couple of times now the rotation that was successful during the regular season, right? And maybe going back to, given all my years of covering him and that team and kind of reading him, it points to a change in goal for game three. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, he's almost not being as cryptic as I would expect him to be, right? Like, you don't bring up the rotation 2 times in 12 hours if you're not thinking about a change. And he never really reveals the starting goalie, so that's just sort of a matter of something that he does, and if he deviates from that, he opens the door to having to do it all the time. But between him mentioning that a couple of times, and then when I asked him last night, if he had thought about making the switch in between the second and third period, and he immediately, in his answer was talking about, well, we might need him for game three. And, so then I'm thinking, okay, you're probably going to him for game three. And I think they should go to him for game three, honestly. Ukko Pekka-Luukkonen earned the net without a doubt. He belonged in the net for game one. He belonged in the net for game two. Alex Lyon, though, if the playoffs had started a month ago, might have been the guy they went to. They had a good 1-2 punch going. And one thing that I think about with Luukkonen, and I'm not as down on Luukkonen as a lot of people are. He had a rough night. Like, all of those goals, I think you want back. But, none more than the second one, obviously. They're not all in that category. But I feel like all 4 of them, you'd like to have a save. But one thing that I think worked really well with that rotation is, I think Ukko Pekka-Luukkonen's ability to handle the workload is still one of those questions that he has to check, because he had some injuries early in the year, and he seems he gets worn down at times. It happened to Lyon too. It's not exclusive to Luukkonen, but it worked so well because there was predictability with their routine, and they both got into a good rhythm. They knew when they were playing. They were getting nights completely off where the third goalie was dressing and they're in street clothes. That's a really good underrated mental reset for these guys. And so I'm looking at it saying, a month ago you had 2 guys that were 1A, 1B. This is the time that you go to the other guy. I think he made all the stops he needed to make in the third period, which is what you want. If he had looked terrible, it might be a different conversation. But Alex Lyon's season got on track the same night that the Sabres season got on track out in Edmonton on December 9th. He did not start that game. Colton Ellis got knocked out of the game. Lyon got thrown in. Lyon hadn't seen the net for a while. He hadn't won a game in like a month at that point. He was working on something. He was working through some injury. He gets thrown into the game, plays pretty well. They end up getting a win. Like, Lyon is wired as a competitor in net, which is not everybody's wiring as a goalie. Like, they're all competitive, but like, he is a battler. He's a guy that thinks the game and really battles in the net. So when he gets thrown in cold, he kind of embraces it. And that snapped him out of whatever he was in early in the season, and he goes on a great run. I'd take my chances and see if something similar might be happening here. And look, he's out there, John, with Tanner Janot. Like, he is a real leader in that room, a real voice in that room. And this is a good time to see if a change can give you a little bit of a spark. And he was really good on the road this year too. So you're going into a hostile environment. I would absolutely make the switch. And part of it does have to do with that goal that, that second goal that went in. That's, even Luukkonen in his answer last night said something about, when you're second guessing your read or when you're questioning your read. It's like, the second I hear that you're questioning yourself, that's a pretty big red flag and a good reason to give him a mental reset, because an early one goes in Boston, that crowd's going to let him hear it. That crowd's going to be letting him hear it regardless if he's in the net. So I'd go to Lyon and see what you get and see if he can find that form he had earlier in the year.
So the power play sucks. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Holy smokes. Matt, I just can't understand why this team, not only they can't get the puck deep, even when they do, they can't retrieve it and it comes right back out of the zone. Why can't this team get established in the zone on the power play? I understand that Boston's putting up a picket fence at the blue line. A lot of teams put up a picket fence in the blue line, and teams can still get past them, go forecheck, get the puck, and get set up. When you're 0 for 31, what the hell? What are you seeing, and what is going on with the power play?
Yeah, I think part of the answer could be, like we talk about speed being their advantage, and it is. Speed can be your advantage on the forecheck too, right? Like, you could flip it into the corner and go get it. And I do think they need to, come up with some answers to solve that pressure, and that would be one of them. At least use the 2 minutes of power play to make the Bruins work, right? And make them retrieve pucks and cleanly try to get the puck out. Like, at least do that, because what you're doing right now is like zapping all the momentum that you have at 5-on-5, and it's really ugly to watch at times. So the other part I think that hurts them on the power play is subtle, but they don't win faceoffs. They're getting schooled in the faceoff circle, and they don't have anybody that can really win them that, belongs on a power play. So Zucker takes a lot of faceoffs, but he's a winger. McLeod takes them for the second unit. I think what might end up being the biggest solve for the power play, I mean, of course, like, tactically, there's only so much you can really, you're not starting from scratch necessarily, but Noah Ostlund coming into the lineup, I think can really help. When they were on that hot streak right before this epic cold streak, Ostlund was in there, and Ostlund is a gamer. Ostlund makes so many good plays in tight areas. He's, of course, small. He's a rookie. This is going to be a big test for him against a really physical, tough Bruins team. It's actually the team that they were playing when he got hurt in the, all this time that he's missed. They'll go after him, I'm sure. But he is, he tends to be the straw that stirs the drink on the power play a little bit. Like, he's a great playmaker, great vision. He's got a good shot. He's already become one of their most important players. They have to, assuming he's healthy, which that injury, I have no idea what the hell's going on. It's been like day to day for a month. But if they can get him back in, that could be as good a jolt as anything.
How about, people have mentioned this, and I am for this 100%. Why not put Malenstein on the power play? Just have him go in, retrieve pucks. I mean, that's what he does. He's one of the fastest guys they have. He goes in, he wins the battle, and he will get the puck, and you can start your power. Why not? You don't need 4 score. Then you put him at the front of the net and be a pain in the ass. I think it'd be a perfect fix.
I'd rather have Benson. I'd rather have Doan be that guy. I'd rather have Tuck. Like Tuck on the top power play. Tuck is one of the best, very best at tipping pucks at the front of the net. Jason Zucker is another one who's outstanding at it. Like across the league, not just on the Sabres. They have, they're among the league leaders in tipped goals the last couple of years. Those are the 2 guys I'm looking at before I look to Malenstein. And that's just a skill thing with Malenstein, is like he's fast. Retrieval wise, like Benson's the guy I want. Like he wins the battles. He gets the puck back. Like he's really good at that. And by the way, that's another thing Ostlund's really good at, is winning battles. Even though he's small, like he's really good at that. So I think you're robbing yourself of something and passing over some worthy guys if you go all the way to Malenstein right away. And I just don't know that he has. And the net front, like I can't think of too many times this year that Malenstein was making tips at the net front. Like that's a skill in and of itself, is to play in front of the net. Benson's outstanding at it. And yeah, Doan's been good at it. Like those guys, like I feel like the power play to your point though, like the power play has been at its best this year when work ethic comes first, when it's like a work type of power play, like Zucker, Doan, those guys were racking up power play goals for a while and they were doing it right at the front of the net. It didn't look pretty. They were just, banging home loose pucks and tipping pucks in and things like that. So I think they have to let the work take over and embrace a little bit of that. And that might mean, a little dump and chase. I know the drop pass and the zone entry is the preferred mode of operation on NHL power plays, not just the Sabres, but they have to, like I said, even if it's not going to result in goals, it has to shift the momentum in the game, because it's just as valuable if you go 2 minutes without scoring and then a minute later you score because you've hemmed them in their zone and you've worn them out a little bit. It won't show up. It'll still be a slump. But to me, I'll look at it and say the power play is doing what it's supposed to do.
Matt, between their inability to win faceoffs and the backwards drop passes that just drive me absolutely nuts, they waste more time screwing around doing that than anything else, right? They just lose so much possession time. What is the strategy? Because a lot of teams do it with the drop pass. You're getting speed into the zone, I guess, right? But if it's not working, why do they keep going? I tweeted the other night, stop going backward on the power play, come forward into the damn zone and get set up. Why do they do it so much?
There are times where it's crazy, like where I look and it's like, a lot of times I get it. Like if there's nothing going on and you're going to have a guy coming with speed that maybe they can't take a good angle on, that they have to account for. But there's times where they come with speed and it's like the guy that has the puck has an opening and he'll still drop it back. It's like the default. And I just feel like it should not be so robotic, but it is not just a Sabres issue. It is a pretty common tactic that build up speed. But you'd have to think, I think anyways, when I watch and I'm like, you guys covering football, you see this all the time, like the different things that emerge and then you find an answer for it. Like it feels like teams have found a pretty good answer for the drop pass. So maybe you got to figure out something else. And, maybe that is as simple as, just dumping the puck in and getting after it. But the faceoffs are a huge issue. There's a lot of people in hockey that'll tell you like faceoffs are an overrated stat and, they don't always correlate to wins and losses. And, the best faceoff teams, don't necessarily have a huge advantage. But the Bruins are like a top 5 or top 7. I forget the exact number. I think they were 4th in the NHL this year in faceoff percentage. The Sabres were dead last. Like when the gap is that wide, I think it's going to impact the game. And it absolutely impacts the power play because, to your point, you lose a faceoff and they get the puck out. That's 45 seconds sometimes just gone. Or maybe even a minute before you get set up the way the Sabres are going at it right now. So faceoffs are a huge deal, but they don't really I don't really know the answer to that. Like Noah Ostlund is not good on draws this year. Like he's still, I think, probably just a strength issue, like first year in the league. Like maybe he'll get there, but Thompson, hasn't been that great. McLeod is probably their best faceoff guy, I guess. If he's on the second power play, I don't love the idea of putting him on the first power play, but I guess it's an option. But they absolutely need to be, and a lot of that comes down to battle, compete. That's part of faceoffs too, because it becomes a team stat sometimes. The other guys getting in there to win the puck back. And I think you could boil a lot of the Sabres issues in last night's game to being out competed. And it's not, the Sabres didn't show up, right? Like, it's not that at all. Like,
they played a decent first period, I thought. They weren't bad in the first period.
They played a strong, competitive, physical Bruins team that just out-muscled them for a lot of the night. And that's going to happen. Like, the Bruins were really desperate to not go back to Boston down 2-0. And and like I said about Sunday night, that's not an easy thing to come back from, even if you're trying with every little fiber of your being to come back from that. It's still, the emotional toll that takes is a challenge. So the compete has to be there. And it's definitely, it's part of, that third period, the Bruins are sending a little bit of a hint about where the series could go. It got nasty last night, but it didn't get nearly as nasty as it could get. So that compete is going to need to be there.
Well, they got to be. This needs to be a mature approach for the Sabres, right? And this is where the experience comes in, or lack thereof, I think. They've gained a lot of it, to Lindy's point, through 2 games, and he's trying to send a message as much to the media as to his team, right, to understand that. But look at the way the goals were scored in the comeback, Matt, in game 1. It was all based on work down low, below the goal line, in front of. All the points you make are so valid about what it's going to take to beat this. You're not going to beat this Bruin team on the rush and with, pretty highlight reel type stuff. You're going to have to win the battles in front of the net and in the corners. And to your point, the Bruins want this to get nasty. And it didn't get as nasty as it could have, but, they're without Tage Thompson for a good portion of that critical period late last night. And why was that? Because he was involved in that stuff. So I think they need to be mature about it. Going into an environment where, oh, by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Bruins tied for the most home wins this year in the NHL with 29. I mean, they're especially good at home. So, I mean, that's a factor. So how much of a factor is that? All of that maybe as this series shifts to TD Garden now.
It's pretty big. I mean, I wondered, game 1, I came out of it thinking, I thought there would be more stuff after the whistle. And I don't know if it was a concerted effort on the Bruins' part to not get the crowd any more amped up than it already was. I don't know if the crowd maybe got to them a little bit, but they weren't as chippy after the whistle as I expected. You got a little bit more of that in game 2. And look, the Tampa game was a huge moment for the Sabres, right? That 8-7 game where they were standing up for themselves. Everybody was involved. Guys that don't usually fight were fighting. But still, I maintain that this is not, there aren't a lot of guys on the Sabres eager to do that. They're willing. They're not eager to do it. There's a few guys on the Bruins that are eager to do it and that want to do it and that will drag guys like Tage Thompson into it if they can, or drag guys like, Zadorov drops Benson in front of the net, right? And then who does Zadorov go and grab? Matthias Samuelsson, right? He's not going after Jordan Greenway and Logan Stanley. He's going after the guys that matter, the guys that impact the game. And the moment for me actually was not that one, because Zadorov drops Benson and everybody jumps in and everybody has their little scrums and everybody gets their 10-minute misconducts. It happens. The moment for me was the McAvoy hit on Mallenstein.
Yeah.
Right. McAvoy tabletops Mallenstein, goes right at his knees. Mallenstein is the ultimate culture guy. He's your guy in that room, right? He blocks shots. He blocks shots when he's limping off the ice. He does everything this team needs. He gets that hit, which is borderline at best, right? And hey, you want your franchise defenseman playing on that line if you're the Bruins, right? That's what you want. but Stanley's on the ice, Dunn's on the ice, Greenway's on the ice. And McAvoy skates to the box with nothing. Tage Thompson wouldn't have if he made that hit. Dahlin wouldn't have if he made that hit on Pasternak. Or if he made that hit on, I guess, who would be the comparable to Malenstein? Sean Corrali, right? Like the fourth line glue guy for the Bruins. Like, Stanley ends up fighting Kastelik, which is, one of their heavyweights, but McAvoy skates off unscathed. McAvoy, Dunn sort of tried to fight him, but the ref got between it. And so the Bruins aren't going to go after Josh Dunn, right? Like, they're going to go after, look what Tampa did. That whole thing started in Tampa because of the hit on Tage Thompson. And they what they did was they hit Tage Thompson from behind, dirty hit to spark a reaction. And then the minute there was a reaction, Darren Radish grabbed Rasmus Dahlin and basically forced him to fight. Like, he didn't grab, a tougher guy. He grabbed one of the stars. And that, I think, is how you have to think about it if you're the Sabres. I know they don't love to do that type of thing, but Benson is stirring stuff up and then he's keeping his gloves on. Like, that's playing into the Bruins' hands, I feel like, of, Tanner Jeannot's skating by the bench. Like, you guys want to fight me or no? Like, and, Josh Dunn, like, that's kind of why he's in the lineup instead of Tyson Kozak. He fights and Kozak doesn't. So I'm closely monitoring that aspect of this series, because now that the Bruins have their home crowd on their side, like, they want that, right? You want to get the crowd amped up, maybe where you didn't want to do it in Buffalo. And they've got arguably the three toughest guys in the series, maybe, with Jeannot, Kastelik, and Zadorov. So, it puts a lot of spotlight on guys like Greenway and Stanley to see how they can answer that call.
What are you seeing out of Dahlin? Because I don't think he's played that well. I think they're doing a really good job on him, limiting him, but I don't think he's played all that well these first two games. What do you see of him?
Yeah, I think it's similar to, like, the defense as a whole. When we talk about, like, so much of what they do well is their defensemen getting involved in the offense, right? And when I asked Lindy Ruff about this today, like, why we haven't seen more of that, he mentioned obviously what the Bruins are doing, at the blue line, taking away certain pockets of ice that the Sabres like to use is working, but he doesn't like the work that the forwards are doing to, kick and drive and kind of open up that ice that the defensemen usually jump into. And so it's all connected. And I think that's probably the most glaring part of Dahlin's game that has been missing for me, is, like, he should be impacting the game in the offensive zone. And we haven't seen that. We really haven't seen it from too many of Buffalo's defensemen. And if the Bruins effectively take that away for the whole series, like, that's a hard situation for the Sabres to be in. So much of their offense is because of how good the top four defensemen are at.
Don't they have one of the highest scoring defensive units in the whole league, right?
And
goal-wise.
Yeah, those guys can all score. They can all skate really well. And the Bruins have done a fantastic job taking those guys away. I do think there's little plays that need to be made, and they need to get a little more connected as a 5-man unit to make some of those plays happen. Like, the puck play just hasn't been perfectly sharp for the Sabres. Like, they're such a fast team in part because they have some fast skaters, but they're a really fast team because they play so fast when they're snapping the puck around. And I know you asked about Dahlin, but it does all feel connected. Like, when that part of their game isn't working, all of a sudden you don't notice him as much, and they can't really afford to have that because he is their best player. And, they're going to need, he said it the other night, dogs have to be dogs. It's time for him to start barking.
If you disrupt such an important aspect, as you pointed out, Matt, and the pace of it, right? The gear that the Sabres want. That's what makes this, it's one thing during the regular season, but when you're in the confines of a 7-game series and those matchups night to night, and tactically what happens and perhaps what doesn't, that's what changes the the aspect and maybe the outlook on this series to the point where I'm going to ask you this, and the sponsor mentioned here, FanDuel, presenting sponsor for this show and others on the Believe Network, had Buffalo as basically a 6-game favorite to win this series. They're still favored, but those numbers are changing a little bit. I'll ask you this based on that. Sal and I both agreed with that at the start of this. I'm kind of feeling more maybe 7 now, although it's still, you don't want to overreact 2 games. I mean, these things are long grinds. Has your outlook on this series changed based on what you've seen in the first 2? Has Boston shown you enough to cause that pendulum to swing? Because for me, it kind of has.
I had the Sabres in 7 before the series, and if anything, it's maybe inched like closer to a coin flip. I mean, I thought coming into this series, there was a lot of people beforehand as the final week of the regular season was playing out, looking at it and saying, oh, who's the preferred matchup, this and that. And people were more afraid of Ottawa, it felt like, locally than Boston. And Boston, to me, I looked at as, for these reasons, a pretty difficult matchup. The way that they want to play and the way that they're capable of playing defensively, along with having arguably the best goalie in the playoffs, that's a tough matchup for a team like the Sabres. That it's a clash in styles with how they want to play, and they are an elite finishing team. Like if you look at the Sabres' expected goals versus their actual goals, really over the last few seasons, they always outperform that because they have some guys that are elite finishers. Well, that gets nullified a little bit when you have an elite goalie in net. And Boston is actually the same. Like if you look at the way Boston is taking advantage, like Boston's like, to Luukkonen's credit, like Boston's a really hard team for a goalie to play against because they're not getting you a ton of pucks, but the ones they do like are usually in a good spot. And they've got 2 guys that are really damn good shooters in Geeky and Pasternak, and some other, sneaky threats throughout the lineup. And all those reasons made it a tough matchup and made it feel like a series that could go the distance. It's one of those series that I think it all comes down to in the beginning. For me, I thought, how quickly can the Sabres like download the experience and get used to playoff hockey? And this is part of that, like the adjustments they need to make, the ability to just wipe the slate clean and not worry about what happened, the ability to get your energy in the right place over the course of a 7-game series. All of that comes with experience, and they need to figure that out quickly. And it feels like if they get through it, they're going to be a lot better off for having to play this style and find answers to this style, because this is basically how teams were playing them in the second half of the season once they started taking them seriously as a contender. And I thought Sabres in 7, and I thought if they win this series, they go to the Eastern Conference Finals. And I still feel that way. Like if they can figure this out, they can win another round for sure. But figuring it out isn't a guarantee, and it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, especially when you're looking at, a question in goal now, right? Which it's like pitching in baseball. You've got to have it. And while it worked for them during the regular season, it sort of remains to be seen if that carries through to this point. All right, Matt, we know you got to catch a flight over to Boston for Game 3. We appreciate it. Tell us more again. You've been on you're the lead beat guy for The Athletic. Tell us about where folks can find your work, obviously there. And I know you have the podcast going as well. Where can they find your stuff?
Yeah, people can go to theathletic.com/Sabres and find everything I'm working on there, and find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show wherever you get your podcasts.
All right. Very good.
All right. Matt, thanks for being here, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Miss you on the Bills beat, though. This kid walked in, whatever it was, 10, 12 years ago, a young kid. Yeah. I'm like, who the hell is this little whippersnapper? And look at him now. He's a star. He's a friggin' star.
And you know what we like about him too, Sal, because he fits the mold here. It's the keep it real type, Yeah. I mean, we don't have to go into example, but, he plays it, Sean McDermott knows who he is. I'll leave it at that.
Well, I learned from the best,
Take it as a compliment, man. Really appreciate it. We'll follow your work and enjoy your time over in Boston. Matt, thanks for being with us. Hopefully we'll have you if this playoff run extends back here on the show. We appreciate it. Matt Fairburn of The Athletic, Sal Maiorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. I'm Adam Benigni, WGRZ TV, Sports Talk Live Buffalo. This has been Believe in Sabres, presented by FanDuel.